Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru. Welcome to the minute 23 Awake Minute by Minute podcast. I'm hosting today, Chris, and with me we have Priyank and Mike, as well as a special guest with Mark. Mark, we'll get to you in a moment to introduce yourself, but Priyank, how are you today? How's life? I see you're wearing a very interesting T-shirt. I'm going to call
Oh, gosh. England, 3 lines.
The 3 lines T-shirt. How are you doing today? Are you wearing that because of the weather, Priyank? It's very hot. It's very light.
Are you watching the cricket?
Oh yeah, cricket. No, I'm very good. I'm wearing this because it's my DIY T-shirt.
Okay.
Lovely. Good. And Mike, how are you? How are you today?
Yeah, the weather here is always the same, so I'm pretty good, thank you.
Weather talk.
Good and consistent. That's why Yogananda picked LA, yeah. Nice weather over there.
I heard it's
Mark,
conducive to spiritual progress to live in a warm country.
I think we
Might say
talked
that
about
somewhere.
this, right?
Yeah.
Isn't there something about the sunshine, and Yogananda talked about this?
Yogananda talks a lot about beautiful spaces. Like when he talks about Ranchi, he talks about how the climate there is exactly perfect, not too hot, not too cold. And he says similar things about California.
Nice. Well, good to see you're following in his footsteps. And somebody else who's following in his footsteps is our dear friend and guest, Mark. Mark, hello, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Chris. Hi, guys. Great to be here.
Lovely to have you. Obviously, we know you, Mark, but maybe you want to introduce yourself. How do you know us, and how did you maybe come into the path of SRF and find Yogananda?
Well, I know you guys through the London Centre, SRF, obviously, and that's a great pleasure for me. How did I get to the London Centre? There's a tiny story there. I think most people have one. I was working in publishing in Soho. I've always been looking, I have to say that. And part of my job was to go out and buy various books for projects we were working on, and I would invariably head straight to the nearest spiritual bookshop and have a nose around. And I actually picked up the autobiography on one occasion and thought, I don't want somebody's life story. I want the knowledge. I need to know, and I put it back and I went back to work, and about 3 weeks later or something, I was just at my desk and I thought, that book. And I just got up and I went to Watkins bookshop in Charing Cross Road. And it was the best $4.99 I ever spent. So then I found, I read it and I thought, aha, here it is. And I found Mother Centre in LA and asked them if they had a centre in the UK. Now I live in Notting Hill Gate, and they were so sweet, as the nuns are on the phone. And they said, yeah, we got a centre in London. And I said, oh, great, where is it? And they said, Notting Hill, because that's where we were using at the time. And I thought, okay, it's a done deal now. And I just went up to the church that we were using, and there was Anita smiling at the door. And I thought, okay. And that was it.
All in.
Yeah.
I just pictured Mark, you know when you said like 3 weeks later you just got up, and I just pictured like a zombie type image. Just get up. What a bugger.
It kind of was. It was a bit like that. It was like, oh, I don't know. How can I explain it? I just got up and I walked out and I went and got it, and then I read it, and then I probably ate it.
Oh, great stuff.
That's a bit under your pillow, yeah.
Well, in fact, I still have. I didn't eat it. This is the old original copy that.
Nice.
Yeah, there it is.
Mine looks just as worn. It's funny. We all like to keep our original, don't we? We all like to keep the first one that we had, the red. Yeah, I don't like. My wife said, "Oh, you can lend them your copy." I said, "No, no, no, they're not borrowing my copy under no circumstance."
No, absolutely not.
Because it's covered in tears, isn't it? Tears of joy and happiness. Can't actually read it. Can't actually read it anymore.
Now I feel bad, Chris, if mine is not covered in tears.
Yours.
Well, yes. Well, lovely to hear this story, and shout out to Anita, who welcomed me in the first day when I arrived at the London Centre. Very, very lovely soul. So yeah, great to hear your story there, Mark. And you, I presume, have watched the Awake documentary. What are your thoughts on the Awake documentary? And when did you first watch it?
I watched it as soon as I could. I've seen it so many times, I can't remember where I saw it first. It got to the point when I was at Convocation in 2017, and I was wandering around in the Biltmore, and somebody walked past me, and in the spirit of it all, I said, "Oh, hi, how are you doing?" And she looked at me, I looked at her, and I thought, "Oh no, hang on, no, I'm just saying hi." And I thought, and I said that strange thing like, "Don't I know you?" And we got into a conversation, and it turns out that she was, I think, Anita Goel from the film.
Yes.
But I felt that I knew, because I'd heard her talking about the science of it all at Harvard so many times, and then we had a laugh about it. But so I've done that, and I've shown it many times to students when I can sort of engineer the conversation into that area. I go, "Oh, yeah, let's have a look at this."
That's a cool thing, Mark. Tell us about your quirky off the trodden path methods of teaching some children some esoteric learning.
Did you say children?
Yeah, well, anyone that in your classroom. I remember you told me some cool stories in that respect.
I mean, I only teach adults.
Okay.
So they're all, well, I mean, we would, it's very interesting, because really underneath it all, everybody wants to know what's going on, and everyone's looking, which will probably come back to this point a bit later on. But the way that I teach that, I mean, they're kind of international students, and their language is very good. And where do we take that? Well, we go out into the world, we go into their lives, we go into the larger subjects, and people are very, very, very interested in what's going on in the world, and they are looking, everyone's looking, you know. So invariably the subject will kind of go into that general area about their lives, and then if I think it's appropriate or they're interested enough, we'll move towards, so what do you think is going on in the world? Why do you think things are like they are now? And
start with the easy questions, yeah.
Well, no, exactly, but everyone is very pessimistic, you know, in the years, you know, it's, well, you know, how do you think it's going to pan out in the next 20 or 30, 50, 100 years? And, you know, but if you tell them, well, actually, like breaking news, in the broad picture, things are getting better, it's a complete reframe for them. And the idea that there might be some sort of structure and plan going on in the macro and then also in the micro is a revelation, and one that isn't, you know, it's not that idea that God loves you and he's going to send you to hell. It's, you know, it's just something more scientific and loving and something they can relate to, which was the same thing with me in the autobiography. I wanted the knowledge and I wanted the practical experience and the peace. And it's an unbeatable combination, I think.
I think you've touched on a few things there that I actually want to bring up throughout the analysis.
Can I go now? Is that it?
Yeah, it's good synchronicities. I like that. I'm totally unprepared, but no, good, lovely stories. And I'll give a quick introduction then, unless you guys have any questions for Mark. before we move in and jump into the analysis of the minute. I'll give a short pause there in case I see any nodding heads. Now, really, with this minute, we continue on from the previous 2 or 3 minutes, where there's talk of Yogananda's the event in Yogananda's life where he loses his mother, and we have let's say a new chapter being opened in this minute, a new page being turned, where we have the beginning of Yogananda's search for his guru, and it's quite an energetic, punchy minute from my measure. So you see some of the images of a young Mukunda in his teens, and he's running through streets of Indian side streets, running through the mountainsides. There's images of Sri Yukteswar's face fading in and out of the pictures. And it gets followed by busy scenes of very yogic-looking people with long beards and tall, and long hair in the streets of India. And really, the narration here is twofold: one by Mas Vidal, and the other by the narrator for Yogananda. And Mas Vidal, who has played a part in the significant part in this documentary so far, and who we had on as an interviewee, which is a fantastic interview there. He's talking very mysteriously here about how Yogananda cracked open a door and he was entering a new reality, and he would face like many trials and tribulations, and of course his life did play out that way. So the narration for Yogananda is essentially praying to the Universal Mother about his desire to really to learn about the Universal Mother and about God, either to be sent a teacher in the form of a guru, or to be taught through visions. And of course that aspect of learning is quite important in Yogananda's life, because he's had multiple visions before. So he was quite open to, look, just send me something. I want to learn more. And he was praying here, and he was fantasizing about how he might meet his guru either in the Himalayan snows, or every time he was leaving his house, he would be searching for faces for his guru, for the images that I've seen, in visions. So it's quite a thrilling, exciting minute, and really we can begin by going to Mas Vidal's mysterious message about cracking open a door and entering a new reality. What do we think by cracking open a door? So which door did Mukunda crack open, and what do we think by that? Maybe Priyank, you can kick us off on that one. You're on mute, actually, Priyank.
I was a bit confused by this line, actually. I thought perhaps they just put it in because it sounds cool, but I personally didn't know what door they were referring to.
Fair enough. We'll come back to you then, Priyank, because I've got a reference. I've got a reference here for you that I think you would appreciate. Mike, what about yourself? What do you think what he's referring to when he talks about cracking open a door?
Well, I would think it's his actual mission that he came down to Earth to do. And I'm not saying that his mother was like stopping him from fulfilling this vision or mission, but it was basically one of those points. And if you listen to Mas Vidal beforehand, he talks about those moments in your life. We also talked about this in our special, those moments in your life that shatter you, that basically shake you up, and then you kind of readjust your goals and your focus. And after his mom passed away, Guruji went on this quest to find his guru with renewed energy, and maybe that's the door that opened that he was talking about.
Mark, would you agree with that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, after the tiger dream, when his mother says, "Where is it? Has it broken the tiger? Has it broken your leg? Where is it?" And after that, doesn't he say that? I was very careful to separate
from the dreams and reality. Yeah.
Separate the real from the unreal. And I think this is the key here. This is where, I mean, the Paramahansa, the Hansa comes in, the divine swan, which is able to, isn't it, separate water from milk in its bill, in its beak. So this idea of discrimination, of being able to separate the real from the real in that way, and also in this context, I think him becoming aware of his, if you like, dual roles, or the integration of the two. He's an avatar, but he also has to live a human life, and the two, while they are absolutely integrated, they also need to be in some sense separate in his mind, and this awareness of what is and what isn't, because he has that awareness. And so he was beginning to realize, oh, this is how it's going to be, this development of his sort of higher discrimination, or bringing in his divine faculties to bear on his life.
Yeah,
for example.
and it's interesting you mentioned there about songs. One of the songs that we would sing talks about all doors are open, you know, the blackbird fly away, and you know, all doors are open to us. And the analogy for doorways and entering into new realities for me is everything is there for us to choose, and it's a question of willpower. And Yogananda's willpower was as strong as, you know, anybody's that I know of, and he really chose that door, you know, the door to go towards knowing universal love and consciousness. And he strived towards that through, you know, the teachings of a guru or so on. So yeah, the other thing that I was going to say, actually, Priyank, towards you here, was the Matrix reference. The blue pill or the red pill. I think it's blue or red, isn't it?
Yes.
And you know, Neil's given a choice, you know, what you want to do, and we all have these choices in our lives, you know, which way do we want to go, which path do we want to follow. But the other reference actually was Lord of the Rings, and it was something, a movies I love, and it was Gandalf, the character Gandalf, who, you know, interestingly has a very long beard, and, you know, he's very guru-esque.
Gandalf the Grey.
Gandalf, the white he becomes, yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he lures away in one way or another Frodo Baggins and Bilbo Baggins in The Hobbit. And he said something, I think, to Bilbo in The Hobbit. You'll have a choice. You know, you can choose to go down this path. It's going to be perilous. It's going to be, you know, challenging in all sorts of ways. But you'll come back and you'll have a story to share. You know, you'll have some memories. And I don't know. This is the kind of relationship I have with this thought. It's we all have our journeys and missions and doors to go through. Yogananda's was especially challenging in some ways.
To what extent do you think it was a choice?
Well, I think
in the sense that we would mean choice.
So, as far as my understanding of this goes, is Yogananda came into this life with a certain purpose, you know, preordained in a way. So it was likely a choice in either a previous life or in the incarnation phase to take up the challenge. So he kind of bust that door open, you know, prior to this event. But I suppose he was propelled into the action since his mother passed, and he got into some sort of time of freedom when he was in his teens, and he, you know, hence why we see in this minute where he's running down the side streets, kind of running away. And we know there's stories here about him trying to run away to the Himalayas when he was young, for instance. And he was too young, you know, you can't just send a young child off to fend for himself. Which maybe there's a story here we can segue to with regards to the journey that he was taking and the tests that he had, you know, when he was younger. Craig, there's plenty of stories that we have about Mukunda and the tests that he had when he was younger. Maybe you have one or two to share with us.
Oof, off the top of my head. I think he suffered a lot from, for example, with some health issues. Like he had cholera, didn't he? And Asiatic cholera, which we've discussed in a previous minute. And then he was very, very thin, wasn't he? So he had like those pangs of like not emotional, but people used to mock how slim he was. So he had those very like, human challenges that we faced. But I think the biggest challenge is the fact that he was born into this family. Obviously it was quite a saintly and pious family. They also had very much the pull of the normalcy of life, i.e. you go to school, you get a good job, you get married, and even his mother wanted some of that for him, but he obviously wanted something completely different. So I think the biggest challenge for him is to stay on his. You talked about the choice. Was it a choice or a mission? We could probably define it as a mission. So he, in his subconscious, he knew that he had this mission. So he had to stay on this mission. This is the reason he was born, and he knew it. He hadn't realized it yet, but he kind of knew it. So I think that's the biggest challenge that he had as Mukunda before he became Paramahansa Yogananda.
Mark, you've read the books, you've studied the autobiographies and so on. Is there a story about Yogananda that jumps out to you as significant and challenging, either in his younger years or maybe in his latter, that you think is noteworthy?
I mean, they're all noteworthy.
They're all, sorry, I recognize that was the wrong word to use there.
But I mean, regarding his youth before he met Sri Yukteswar, because then everything changes. And I think in a sense, this minute we're in now is presaging that. It's just setting the scene. It's opening him up, ready for the meeting. And then that will in turn will take him eventually to, LA. I think that if you read something like Mejda, there's so many stories of him being normal, but absolutely not normal. And I kind of struggle in myself with this idea of choice versus mission, or what is it like when an avatar comes down? Are they fully aware of what they got to do? Are they just going through the motions for our benefit? Or are they actually struggling with them in some way? But there are certain things that happen that just blow it all out of the water. I've got one here, which is when he was in Chittagong, and he's out with his brother. He's out with his friend. They're doing some running, and they're coming back, and they're picking up some fruit, and they're just on the way home. And then Lahiri Mahashaya appears to him and tells him, Mukunda, it is God's wish that I come to you today. Remember what I say to you. You've come on earth as God's representative to fulfill his wishes. Your body is his temple, sanctified by prayer and meditation. And he goes on like this, that your body, mind, and life must never deviate from the thought of God, even for a moment. The blessings of the Infinite Father are upon you. Your faith in him must be absolute. He will protect you from all dangers. One day, your ideals of yoga will inspire all mankind. Mukunda, march onwards. I mean, what do you do if someone appears and tells you that?
Was that from Mejda, Mark?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Wow. That's epic. Because he would have seen pictures. He would have seen his mother had a picture of Lahiri Mahashaya. So he would have recognized him. That's pretty profound, isn't it?
Yeah, and he said,
it was like the family.
Sorry, Mike.
No, go for it.
He just said, as they walked away, we looked back and saw the saint blessing us with upraised hands. That was it.
Yeah.
Sorry. What were you going to say, Mike?
Yeah, pretty good. Like hanging out with Mukunda back in the day, that would have been some interesting experiences. I think you're like spot on with this mission versus choice thing, because I feel like this is something Guruji wants to tell us as well, that we all come to Earth with a mission, and he shows in his autobiography and through all the stories in his life that there were so many things that wanted to draw him away from his mission, and ultimately those were some of the tests that came after his mother passed away. Like there's this one story in the autobiography where he goes to an astrologer and he tells him, you're going to be married 3 times, your first wife will die young, and blah blah blah. And he was like, no, because I know what I want, and this is not it. And he started seeking out different saints, right? So after his mom passes away, there are all those chapters about like Master Mahasaya, who he later calls Kebalananda, and a few others. And he has also this idea to go to the Himalayas all the time, because maybe he was a yogi in the Himalayas in his past incarnation. But he kind of knew what he wanted, but life was testing him by asking him for patience, because what he wanted didn't materialize instantly. I think it took like 2 or 3 years, right? Until he actually met Sri Yukteswar.
What, Mike, what is your mission statement?
Yeah, see, that is the problem. I feel like so there was a time in my life when I had no idea what it was. And then at some point I started introspecting, and then I write it down, and then it keeps changing. Then 1 year later, I do the same exercise where I go like, what do I want for my life? And then I look at my goals from last year, and sometimes they are still the same, and sometimes they look different because my life changed or something like that. And I feel like that is something Guruji, it came to him very easily. I mean, he was constantly having those thoughts, and he was sharing those thoughts in the autobiography, like what is my next goal? And whenever like he shares something that people usually don't do, like he shares his thoughts, his feelings. Often he's like, I feel like I should go to America. This person told me I should go to America, you know, like, or I feel I'm looking for my guru somewhere in my, like, you know, he's very aware of his own thoughts and of what he actually wants. And he keeps sharing this in the book. There's not like, usually when you have a person that is not Yogananda share their life, they wouldn't go on those little details and say, oh, that's why I think that. You would say, oh, who knows if that's right or not? But he knew it. He was just intuitively, he was very evolved.
Mark, what is your mission statement?
My own life.
We all have a mission, don't we?
To do what I came to do.
That's like the most vague mission statement in the history.
Well, I'm still working on it, to be honest. Like Mike says, some things don't change, like this stuff, this context doesn't change. The details inside that larger context about me and my life and my work, I mean, you know, with Kshatriya, shine the light, help people, you know, these are nice concepts and general guidelines for living your life. I mean, you want, how much micro detail would you like, Priyank?
I don't know. When I thought of the question, I asked myself the question, and I had that easy cop-out answer: self-realization fellowship. You can just quote that, and that's your goal and mission.
Well, samadhi. There we are. Okay.
which type of samadhi? No, just kidding. Chris, do you want to have a crack at the impossible question?
The impossible question. You know, I think actually with the young adults group in London Centre, there was some of the monks were there, and we were all sitting around in a circle. You guys might remember this, and the questions, a similar question was being asked. And I think, Priyank, to your point, my response was to be self-realized in this lifetime, you know, and that was it. Yeah, I was kind of told that by this psychic lady out of the blue, said, you know, the other day to me something very similar, like, you know, keep on the path, you know, keep doing what you're doing, you know, you'll work there. And it's funny how I think we all share. We have a brotherhood that Yogananda built within the SRF. And I think we all share in that as souls, this kinship together. And I felt that very strongly with the young adults, you know, the people there just felt like family and friends. You know, you kind of almost recognize people straight away, and it was lovely. So yeah, I feel like I know that this is my mission, my purpose. So quite simple for me, actually, Frank. You didn't catch me up.
Mike had the most challenging question because he had it fired at him first out of the blue.
I'm gonna create a meme with like Priyank, like my mission for my life, self-realization.
Yeah. I was actually wondering, you know, if anybody, you know, like Yogananda here, had the real desire to run away in search of the divine, which is slightly different to what we're talking about. Because to your point, Mark, you know, an avatar coming into this world, this is a crazy world, you know, and I think it's been talked about by Yogananda saying, you know, do you want my crazy or your crazy? Follow my crazy, in one of the stories, if you remember in his lessons. You know, everything's crazy, but which crazy do you want to choose in life? And so even an avatar coming into this world, having to deal with the craziness of this world, will face.
But even so, I'm still not sure if he's just saying that for the benefit of us.
For the benefit of us, yeah. Oh no, that's the question. Yeah.
No, more and more, I'm inclined to think that he arrived with it all sorted out and just played this beautifully complex role for us so we could relate to it.
Yeah,
I have
he did. Sorry, there's so many points to say. Mike, you jump in.
Oh no, I just had a question for Priyank, because this idea of running into the Himalayas, when I grew up in Austria, nobody ever said that they would do something like that. You know, it's like, seems like a bit of an Eastern or Indian idea that in order to be spiritual, you have to go into a cave and meditate, right? And I feel like Yogananda keeps bringing up this story also because he wants to change the narrative from instead of doing that, you keep your earthly duties and at the same time try to self-realize yourself. Do you think Guruji is trying to highlight this shift of paradigm that also Sri Yukteswar tries to teach him afterwards?
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on, Mike. But the reason why that romantic notion of running away to the Himalayas exists is because there are literally countless stories of examples of saints becoming realized by a journey into the Himalayas, not just pilgrimages, but literally leaving everything behind and just going in that direction. And there's countless stories from our epics to like the most unknown saints from your village. So what does this do? It's like, you know, we've seen the Matrix, so we can relate to Neo, right? If in our journey. But similarly, like in Indian culture, we see these glorious examples, and these are the movies of the, you know, last thousands of years in India, and that's what you naturally would think, that's how you reach divinity. But obviously Yogananda has said no, you know, you go within, not without, to find and seek the ultimate.
Lahiri Mahashaya also told him that his life would be played out in the jungle of civilization as opposed to the other one, couldn't he?
Similar to Lahiri Mahashaya himself, right? He was known as the family saint, or is that correct?
Yogi householder.
Correctly. So he was living and working. Yes, exactly. So it can and should be done, right? I actually have a story. When I was a kid, I wanted to run away from all the craziness of the world, but I only made it as far as my driveway in the countryside, which is it's quite long, but I didn't quite make it to the Himalayas. I had my little suitcase packed. I think I was about 5 years old, and my mum was sitting there laughing, taking pictures of me as I walked up the lane. But
where did you think you were going?
Belfast.
The big smoke, the big city.
The big smoke.
The hills of Donegal. Okay.
The hills of Donegal, exactly. Well, Ireland's a very magical place, so plenty of places.
Lahiri Mahashaya, he was some householder, no? He was like, I think one day he was like hovering above the bed with his eyes glowing or something. And then his wife became his disciple. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Epic
Exactly.
stories.
There's a couple stories, if my internet allows, it's been a bit choppy today, but of Yogananda's early life that I wanted to share myself, a couple of short stories about in the autobiography when his mother passed away. His brother came to him with a message that was a delayed message from his mother, and he initially delayed this because he feared that Yogananda would run away again to the Himalayas, and he delivered the message, and it was his mother saying that Lahiri Mahashaya had indeed told his mother, just as you recall finding there, Mark, in a similar story, but told his mother that Yogananda Mukunda would grow up to be a yogi that would be a spiritual engine and carry many souls to God, and that's pretty great to hear as a young individual. But later, there were stories shared about when his mother and his sister, Yogananda's mother and sister, saw or recounted a story when Yogananda was lying down and he had a vision of a great light, and they witnessed him motionless on his bed with his face illuminated and his voice ringing with an iron resolve, and he spoke about going to the Himalayas again in search of the divine. So to your point, Mark, potentially this was always there. He could always see maybe some sort of past life, or he was aware of some greater plan, and he was going to play his part in that plan.
Well, I mean, in minute one, he says, "I was conscious in my mother's womb." I mean, you think, okay, all right, you win.
Yeah, and when he was crying, as a child, he was crying out of frustration because he couldn't speak and communicate. Like, he was very much aware of even being a baby, an infant. Yeah, all very, very interesting. We could continue to talk, but let's move on to the next point. I think it was Priyank, you actually wanted to talk about the what ways do devotees search for the guru. And this was interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe.
So we see that obviously Yogananda has this zeal, right, to search for his guru, and this minute kind of is probably one of the most important minutes that like kind of describe that yearning and show that yearning. And yeah, I was just wondering, that's such an interesting question for me. Like, I think I shared this story as like when I started getting into spirituality, and I had this similar like romantic notion that I'd go searching for my guru, and I'd explore all the various paths, and I'll know when one path has resonates with me, and I'll be there. But all the while, so I went to India and I was doing this stuff, but all the while I was reading the autobiography of a yogi. So I didn't need to go out across India, spending all that time and energy. I just had to look in. And there's a saying that says, like, you don't go outwardly searching for your guru. You just increase your own yearning. And if as you increase your own yearning and your own devotion, the guru will pluck you out of that stormy sea.
Yeah, and Mike, you were born into your guru family, so you clearly chose before you were born that you chose the right family.
Yes, a great blessing, as they say. Yeah, I mean, that makes everything a bit different. If you don't have this whole search, like I like all the stories of how people found their guru, but I don't have one myself, because I felt like when you grow up with it is just in front of you the whole time. I didn't have to work for this at all. It was already there, and I just had to take it. So I love all the stories.
You could have run away to the Himalayas.
Oh yeah. I could have also said, I'm not spiritual, this is not for me, or something. But at the same time, I love the stories that when other people tell me, when they go to the library and the autobiography falls on their head or something. Like, those are very beautiful stories. And for me, it was just, I was born, it was there, and then I can't remember a time where Guruji wasn't there.
And what was it like, can I ask, growing up as a child and with your parents and in such a wondrous sort of context? How was that? Or do you not know?
I've asked a similar question, Mark.
It is difficult, you know, because as a child, you don't want any of that. You don't want the discipline of meditating every day. You like the stories, the spiritual stories, but doing the work and that is something that you, as a child, you don't really want. And when your parents, my parents, they struck a balance after a while. I was the first child, so with me they went the most. You got to meditate, blah blah blah. After I have like 2 other siblings. They mellowed and mellowed because they figured out this is not, you cannot indoctrinate it. So in the beginning, I had a bit of a hard time with that because as a kid, you want to please your parents, but you don't want to sit down and meditate. That is not something that is something that comes easy. That kind of self-discipline came later for me, and there were certainly times where this was all very frustrating for me. But at the end of the day, I'm very thankful that it was always there, and I could always.
Did you have a sense that always have a sense of, like, meditation aside, that this is a great context to be growing up in?
Yes, but I don't know if it's necessarily better or worse than if you find the guru at some other point in your life. What I like now is that me and my siblings, we are all on the path, and my dad as well. And I have this family, which is also a spiritual community. And that is something I really love. As a child growing up, I have mixed feelings, let's put it that way, because I don't think it's easy to convey those, especially in the world we live in right now, because the world pulls you, especially in the West, it pulls you exactly in the opposite direction. And as a child, you know, as you grow up, when you're young, you believe everything your parents say, and then you go into adolescence and you become an adult, and then you kind of believe more what the world actually is, and striking that balance wasn't super easy, but at the end of the day, I'm thankful for how it was.
Sure, no, thanks for that. Because people always, they're in situations where they say, oh yeah, my parents were Kriya bands, or I grew up in that. Everyone says, wow, you're lucky. But I think clearly, I mean, it makes sense that it would have certain pressures inherent in that.
I remember when I was 16, my mum really didn't want me to go into the spiritual path because she knew that for example, when I went to India to look for my guru, she knew that if I found an ashram that I liked, I probably wouldn't finish my education. I would have just gone all in. So, like, for example, when we were living in Hounslow, you know, when I was 16, she'd physically stop me from going to the Brahma Kumaris that were down the road, because their practices are really intense, and, like, you know, you'd have to go there and spend weekends and, you know, holidays away and just meditating and things like that. So she didn't want me to do that because she knew I wouldn't finish all my educational responsibilities and other things like that, like buying a house and getting married and things like that.
Yeah, you should be an engineer instead, Frank.
Yeah,
proper engineer.
Well, she got away because I ended up doing both, because I ended up being an engineer and doing all this, you know, meditation and stuff.
So, Priyank, another India question for you. So if you talk to your Indian relatives or something, and there's this whole thing going on where you show off how great your sons are doing and stuff like that, and if you say, oh, one of my sons became a renunciant, how does that go over?
No. Not well. But it's interesting. You probably get more respect in Western family, I imagine, than in Eastern family.
All right.
For that, which is interesting, isn't it?
I mean, I bringing those two threads together and adding one of time as well. I grew up in the Church of England, which, I mean, it's like a drop-in centre, really, by comparison. But my grandmother was in Bengal in the 1920s as a missionary. And in fact, here we have one of the many brass things that I have now that are hers. So I grew up with this sort of India. She was out in India for 3 years, I think. I mean, 1,000 stories. But, you know, in my more, not frivolous, but kind of imaginative moments, if you will, I wonder whether she ever kind of went to Puri or Benares, or happened to cross the path of any of the great ones out there. But it certainly rubbed off on me. She had very little time for the church in its current form, and if she was still around, she would absolutely been SRF. But it gave me that flavour of that feeling for India that it always stayed with me, and I wonder whether that was just a kind of the aroma of the past or the setting of some new context. I don't know, but it was definitely there. Still is.
Mark, is that brass utensils? Is that an amulet by any chance?
I've got about 18 or 20 pieces.
One day, Mark, you're going to come back, like after you've had that experience in cosmic consciousness, you're going to come back and all your pens are going to be on the floor because that thing would have
true.
disappeared.
We'll be gone.
Well, around here, it probably just means I've been burgled.
Oh gosh!
But I'll keep you posted on that one.
You know, I to share my journey here, for what it's worth, I actually didn't even know what a guru was gosh, I'll embarrass myself here, really until I was 26, 27, until I saw and read the book Autobiography of a Yogi. Even to the point when I finished it, you know, I set it down, I knew there was something monumentous about it. And, you know, started going to the London Centre. I still had questions, is Yogananda my guru? Because I just didn't really know what the process was. I didn't know how is this, can we get this official somewhere? Do we stamp it on the page? Like how do we do this, you know, in this Western kind of culture of an idea? Can we get it, you know, can I find somewhere? But certainly one of the SRF devotees asked me a very simple question. Well, like who else is it? Who else is it? You know, and Yogananda really became this, you know, figurehead in my life. Is the guru for me from then on. And you know, it's significant because to me, as a person who hadn't any exposure to Eastern philosophies until, you know, late into his 20s, it's all very mystical, magical. And to crack this door open, to go back to the theme of the minute, it was a whirlwind, absolute whirlwind for a few years of change, of ways of perceiving the world and the universe. But something I'm incredibly grateful for. And yeah, really something that I had to stick at and really push through in many moments of trial myself, of, you know, going to go back to Northern Ireland where you just don't really get exposed to these kind of teachings. So one thing that actually was a real pivot point for me was sitting down having dinner with a friend of mine and her cousin. And I think I've maybe told this story before, and I was talking about the Steve Jobs movie, and I was saying about how Steve Jobs was quite spiritual in some ways. You know, he was striving for perfection and, you know, beauty and simplicity. And I was giving this little speech about how I thought Steve Jobs was really spiritual. And the cousin then sat opposite me, and he later told me that he was asking for a signal, a sign to be able to introduce me to the autobiography of a yogi, which was just that moment where I was talking about Steve Jobs and talking about this, talking about a book he read and this and that. And then this friend's cousin said, oh, do you know anything about this book? And that was really the journey for me that started from that conversation, from your point, Mark, which I want to tie this back into, this kind of choice of willpower at some conscious level, superconsciousness, subconscious level, that we're all striving towards knowing something greater than what the world is, how the world is typically perceived today. And that conversation led me onto this path by some kind of level of choice and willpower by myself and my cousin's friend. So all these little things add up, and whether we're consciously deciding them or deciding them in some kind of dream state, I'm not entirely sure. Yeah. Please, any listeners, by the way, if you have any journeys to share with us, please feel free to, write to us. We will love to hear from you and interact with you in that way as well.
How easy was it for you to accept the idea of having a guru?
Well, I think that's sort of the point I was maybe trying to make there. Is it was very difficult because I didn't know how that should have been done. In what way should I have had a vision from Yogananda? Should he have come to me in some way? Should I have communed with him in one way or another? I didn't know, but quite difficult because I rejected the Protestant faith and the Catholic faith for desire for knowing something more concrete, and found that in the SRF, in Yogananda's teachings through scientific meditation. So for me, it was a systematic, going through rejecting the, certain faiths that were presented to me, and then finding a true teacher in Yogananda, the likes of which I hadn't experienced before. So it was quite clear to me that this was somebody that I truly could follow, rather than my, local priest or minister who I was asking questions and they might not have had answers for me that were satisfying my needs.
Chris, you can rest assured that you're not the only one that has such feelings. In fact, we're trying to address this kind of gap in self-realization fellowship and many spiritual paths, really, because you jump in and then, what do you do now? Like, just the questions that you asked, a lot of people ask that question, and we're trying to, in innovative ways, and this podcast is one of the innovative ways, we're trying to fill that gap for at the center and around, for other people in other spiritual paths as well.
Because in the West, we're really not that used to the intensity of the relationship and the depth of that relationship and the profundity of the teachings and the size of the context, that we're used to, like a couple of questions here and there and a quote from scripture, and like you said, Chris, I always had that sense that the priests, God bless them, they don't know. And I thought, somebody must know. Somebody's got to know something. And it turns out that they do. But it wasn't the priests.
Yeah, and I always had a lot of empathy, looking back now, to people who are in faith institutions who are purely living off faith, and aren't really going by knowledge in depth, is what Yogananda teaches. So, hopefully, just as Lahiri Mahashaya would say that more souls are going to be brought into the path of SRF, and through their desire to know, they'll come to Yogananda's teachings and others that are on similar wavelengths.
But we're coming to that point, I think, in history where people want the science and they want the experience. They don't want stories about fish and sheep anymore.
So what's the science behind? Take a bite.
With respect.
With respect, yeah. It sounded like that.
Right.
Interesting. Our previous one of our previous episodes was dogma, not science. No, Not science, no, not dogma, but science was the title, wasn't it? And I think that encapsulates your point, Mark, quite well.
Thank you very much. Yes, there it is.
Growing up in the Catholic faith, this is, I don't know, it feels so nice because Catholic is such a top-down approach to everything. Top-down approach, and then at the end of it, there isn't much there. So that's kind of what I always felt, because like that was one of the things that I had in my life. I grew up in this SRF family, but then I also grew up in this super Catholic country in Austria, where, like, you know, they say church and state is separated, but really you go to school and they put you like, and there is school a mass, for example, and you go to church and then you get your wafer and everything, and you know, you get blessed, and this was so, on the one hand, it was the basis of a lot of morality, but at the other hand, it was a lot of things felt merely like a ritual, but very little behind it. And so I understand those people who go through this and then say, but there has to be more. They look for a guru. They actually look for some wisdom. Because the idea of the church is great. You know, you have this institution that knows everything and inspires people. But then it's like Guruji says, the honey and the hive, right? Like, what if you have that hive and there's no honey in it? Then what do you do? They need to look for another one, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's part of. We're fortunate to be in this path because Yogananda didn't recreate Christianity. He's just telling us what the original Christianity was, right? And that sometimes is lost in some of the churches that are established. Like, you know, we've talked about this in the past. Like, but you know, how many Christians meditate? You know, look within to actually to experience Christ, rather than, as Mark says, you know, just churchianity and going to church, and that's your worship for your life. That's it. But there are still, even in those faiths, there are some Christians that you can see the devotional zeal in them, and you know, they're applying the teachings to every walk of their life. And if they just add that meditation element, that introspective, you know, the scientific techniques of meditation, you know, they would fly. But that bit there is sometimes the limiting factor.
But when Mrinalini Mata and her family went to San Diego temple, and she went for the first time, and she had to be kind of persuaded to go, and she took her Bible with her. And when she finally did meet Yogananda, and her concern was about her existing faith, and he said, well, when you go from first school to like junior school, like, you don't lose what you had before, you're just building on it. And she said, oh, that was it. She said, okay, it's fine, got it. So in a sense, I mean, the church absolutely has its place, but as we say, that people are moving on, perhaps, to wanting something that's a bit more contemporary, and, if you will, or scientific or practical. But that's not to denigrate the church and what it's done and all of that. But it's just like, okay, are we everything else? Are we moving up as a level now? And it seems like this is what SRF came to do.
It's interesting also that it only appeals to, just like, for example, I think there's many people that read the autobiography of Yogi, and even though they'll see the truth in it, they won't. That won't necessarily be the path for them. That'll just be the impetus to further develop their own spiritual yearning. So it's even within the people that would appreciate the science of Kriya Yoga, there's only 5% or something like that would actually then take that plunge in that direction. You know, how many people do you meet that, oh, I've read the autobiography, it's a fantastic book, but did you then go and try meditation? You know, once a week, you know, I do it every now and then, or I go to the yoga studio.
But that's fine too, isn't it? But, you know, like
stepping stone.
in minute 88 or something, it was a place setter for millions. People, just like introduce them to something a larger context. Yeah,
that's what I was thinking about. The, you know, to Mike, to your point, and the Christian faith, like many years ago, it was only the priests that could read the Bible, and it wasn't until later that it was actually translated. And it was the big hoo-ha of the day, you know, oh crap, you know, all these teachings are going to be everywhere, you know, we're not going to have central power or control. But, you know, Jesus was killed for the things that he said. And the time, going back to my favorite topic of the yugas, shout out to Mike and his dad. Let's get your dad on to talk about the yugas. It's a dark age, you know, it was a time of, you know, ignorance, and this is the way of the universe, of the world, the way the mechanics of this work. So many souls across the universe, there's always going to be a place for certain teachings to take hold. So yeah, I have a question. Who knows the scientific backing behind why gurus typically have long beards with long hair? What is going on there? I mean, it's a joke question, by the way. It's not an actual question. I see your eyes rolling to the top of your heads, thinking, I don't think there is any kind of science to this, but I did hear, actually, interestingly, about the cosmic energy being picked up on the hair, and I don't think so, whether somebody was trolling me or not.
I heard that too. I do get the irony, Chris, in my case, but I feel like I read somewhere that like the hair is like an antenna for cosmic energy or something. That might be a reason for why things are going with me the way they're going.
You're internalizing it, Mike. You're internalizing it.
No, I'm joking. But I also read that, and that's the reason why they don't cut it and put it in a turban. But I don't know much about it, to be honest.
maybe they're just way beyond fashion.
Yeah. Don't have time to cut the hair, cut the beard. Yeah. I asked this really because the in this minute you see these various camera shots of depicting Yogananda searching for his guru, and it's looking at one spiritual looking guy and looking at another, and they all have long beards or long hair or both, or braids or something like this, and they typically all fit the profile. And to my mind, I was like, well, what is he? What does a guru look like? And then you look at Babaji, yes, long hair, but shaven, right? And Yogananda is shaving, long hair. You've got Lahiri Vanshai and Sri Yukteswar don't have long hair. So they come in different shapes and sizes. But I just thought through that.
Well, I think the same thing. What does a saint look like? And when I look at Dayamar and Rinalini and some of the advanced, like Richard and Andy, think, oh, okay. But then I think, well, what would I think they look like? Some medieval painting, or
with a halo.
Yeah. Just the aureole of light coming off there. I mean, maybe they have got it. I just can't see it. But I think it's
funny enough. The Saint Francis and the Franciscan monks, they cut their hair, right? So I'm not sure.
That's for minimalism, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know. Really, like they all have this bald spot in the middle, right? That they have on purpose. I don't really know what the significance is of it. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I would say that. I actually went in Portugal to a very, very old temple up in the mountains in Sintra, near Lisbon. Mm-hmm. And it's if you've been there yet, and it's this
not a temple, but Sintra is beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's this temple carved into the mountainside, into the rocks, and they lived a very, very basic life, studying science, with kind of chemistry and botany, and meditating. And there was a site where there was some kind of tombstone honoring a site where one of the monks just literally meditated in his entire life, and people used to bring him small bits of food, but it was literally a place where you could barely sit cross-legged. You could barely sit, you know, in this tiny little small space. So the Franciscan monks were hardcore, and it was surrounded by cold stone and rock. So I'm guessing these, you know, those guys just wanted to shave everything off, not to have any kind of anything to eat, clean themselves easily.
Well, as
So
per
shall we?
Tibetan monks as well, and Buddhist monks.
Exactly.
I don't want to stay too long on this topic, but now I'm thinking, did Guruji cut his hair ever?
Ooh.
He would have had to do, right? Because
he had long hair, but I'm not sure if he ever cut it. Did he cut it to, like, I know he cut his beard when he was on the ship, right? To fit in more with the Western kind of idea of fashion, I guess. But I don't know if he ever cut his hair.
People have locks of his hair, don't they? I mean, Diamar's had one, and but a lock's not a haircut, is it?
No, it might have come from a comb or something.
it's a big ball.
Yeah, if any listener knows this, that would be interesting. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, 100%. Because the mysteries of life are endless, right? So, yeah, please share any information. So we can move on to the next subject, and it's one, Mark, you again tying back to your original introduction touched on about Yogananda scanning, really going from anytime we left his house, he would scan for his guru, looking left and right and checking out everybody's bit. And this is interesting because in the lessons Yogananda talks about recognizing people from past incarnations, and recognizing those that you've spent lives with before. So, you know, I suppose that in itself is maybe enough of an explanation of sorts to, you know, whenever you meet somebody for the first time that you feel like, you know, Mark, have you had experiences like this where you just look at somebody like,
oh yeah, no, absolutely, and sometimes it just kind of knocks you over. Well, sometimes it sounds like it happens a lot, but certainly there's been moments in my life when you have that context, you think, oh, this is, oh, hello, haven't seen you for a while, kind of thing, rather than if you didn't have any sense of previous lives, you might wonder what was going on. But yeah, definitely a sense of recognition. I mean, you know, I think with friends and people you've known, it is a more or less an exact kind of science that you have a feeling of comfort, or a feeling that you've known. You can't place it necessarily, perhaps more with some people than others. But the idea of just being able to pick up on their astral light or something. But like, as you say in the lessons, Yogananda talks about like the way they walk, or things that they do, or various physical characteristics that seem resonant. There's a sort of an intensity or a depth to things that otherwise wouldn't be there. But I think with where Master had already had a picture to work with, so it's that what it means that he was scanning to try and superimpose, if you like, one on the other. I don't know. What about you guys? Have you had that in your lives, that sense of connection when you meet people?
Yeah, I have a few times actually. I remember I don't know if I was leading the service or if I can't remember. Chris, perhaps you can tell me. When we first met, was I leading the service? Or do you remember when we first met? Because when I first saw you, I saw you in the chapel, and I recognized you, and I made sure I talked to you straight after the service. Yeah. And I said, you got to come to our young adults meetings. And I from somewhere, I don't know how, but I was instantly magnetically pulled towards you.
Yeah, I remember that actually. Yeah, I do, and I just thought everybody was so friendly here because you know, I walked in.
No, I'm not. I get that out of this.
I need to give you this massive hug, and it just felt like she was, you know, a second mother immediately. And then, yeah, Priyanka, I remember, you were coming up. I don't think you were leading at that time, this is probably going back December 2016, I think it might have been. So yeah, I do remember that though, Priyank, I do.
And then Chris, I think you pretty much told me about your a couple of your mystical experiences straight away, and I was like, whoa, this guy's pretty deep. And then I don't know what inspired you to tell me straight away, but I thought it was pretty profound. But I'll tell you, we won't go into that. That's, I think it's quite personal. But the other time that that's happened, when I met my wife, I was speed dating, and I remember like we were, you know, you speed.
Let me just think about that for a second.
Let that sink in. Let that sink in. Yeah.
I have
speed dating. Okay. Yeah.
I have a caveat.
This is before the dating apps.
There is a caveat. I'll throw the caveat in. It was a community-run speed dating thing that was part of our family thing. That so it was a community thing for people in our caste. So yeah, it was approved by the elders. That kind of.
Were there other people or just you two?
No, there was.
Your mother was right next to you.
So anyway, in fact, it was just parents. Just parents. No kids.
Your minute is up.
I remember. So I was anyway. You know how it works. It was pretty much the same. But when at the end, like so. We'd finished, and I'd seen 3 or 4 or met 3 or 4 girls, but my eyes were instantly drawn to Krina's face, and I thought, oh, she looks really familiar, looks very sweet, and then I was looking forward to meeting her, but it ended, and then we all had to leave, and I was like, no, I'm just gonna meet her anyway, and then we met, and then we were talking for about an hour, and I knew from that first meeting, I knew that she was going to be my wife, and she doesn't believe me, but I had like in my mind, I had like 4 or 5 criterias, and within the first minute, I knew she met every single one of them.
Ticks all the boxes.
So from 5-10 meters away, I saw her face, and then when we met, I knew that was going to be the life partner. You're
such an engineer, Priyank. It's like instead of love at first sight, you got like, oh, you tick all the boxes. Oh yeah, clear.
You're structurally sound, yeah.
Okay.
What about you, Mike?
Yeah, it happened to me a few times to meet someone where I kind of knew I would be having a connection with them. And for me, that's like you guys said, it's always, you probably met in a past lifetime and you're meeting again. And Guruji says we should look out for those people and reconnect with them. That is beneficial to us. So I keep trying to do that. Maybe that way we'll meet all of them. Yeah.
I think for me, the way I've noticed this in my life, there's so many people in my life that I've met. There's been a strong connection with, but we've went apart. Our lives have inevitably been separated. But every time the communication opens up again, it's like a second hasn't even passed, and you're just dying to talk to each other, and you're dying to know exactly what's happened in another person's life, every detail if you can, just actually live through them. And there's something about that I noticed. There's that magnetism and that love, and it's very endearing relationships I have with several people. And on paper, I guess you might not think we'd be the best of closest companions or anything like that, and but it's like family meeting up again from time to time. But I actually do have one with my current fiance, soon to be wife, where we met on a train, and I sat down opposite her on the train in the seat, and we started talking because I asked her to look after my things on the train whilst I went hunting for some food. Came back empty-handed, and she offered me some ponchiquejo, which is like cheesy bread, and it's beautiful. And I ended up eating several of these, bits of bread. And she thought that was extremely odd because British people don't accept food from strangers. And yeah, there I was scoffing my face full of her snacks that she brought with her, and we ended up just talking all that time, and we were back at mine, sitting. We just ended up speaking the entire night, and I actually, in enthusiasm, ran into my room and grabbed the lesson that I had at the time, and came in and showed her. Said, "See, this is what I think about you," and it was a lesson just on this subject. It's look out for those in your life in your life that you have known from past lives. You might notice the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they move, and that was just how I felt about Barbara from the very first moment. So that very, very, very fortunate, grateful to have had that experience. I'm very lucky that that actually worked out, because she otherwise might have thought I was a bit of a weirdo or a freak. Sure, I know you from a past life. Sorry, what? Yeah, okay. But that was fine, and we knew from that day onwards, that we were, going to have a relationship. But there's so many moments now with Yogananda's teachings that enhance life to a point of awareness that makes it so much more gratifying, in my view, that otherwise you might have just gone through life asleep, not picked up in these subtle moments of recognition, of people's faces. So yeah, entirely blessed and thankful for the teachings. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have got there on my own. So thanks to thanks to Yogananda. So
and had you used that technique of trying to attract women other than that occasion, bringing out a lesson, going, I know you.
It was the first and last time that will be employed. I don't think it would work with anybody.
Yeah, I'm surprised you. It's so cool. I really love this story, that on your first meeting you did this. It's just amazing.
Yeah, very, very bold. But thankfully I wasn't thinking. It required very little thought. Otherwise I probably would have messed it up. But nice. So we have, I think, Mark, you wanted to discuss a topic on human divine aspects of that situation for you. So,
I mean, I think we kind of touched on this a bit earlier on, like his role, and to what extent the human is permeated with the divine, or the divine is permeated with the human. Like, what was he up to? How much of it was that he was just doing it all for our benefit, and how much was he actually working through his own stuff? It looks like he was working through his own stuff, and then other times he clearly can't have been. So as we said earlier, or I said earlier, I think I kind of conclude that he turned up with the whole thing. No, I can't even answer the question.
Fully aware, at least.
But then he still was subject to the vagaries of the human emotion and all of those things as well.
He talks about the human emotion, doesn't he? And using like a cocktail mix, negative emotions, like anger and fear, and mixing it with more divine emotions. So for sure, in my mind, he had these emotions just like anybody else did. I remember there was a story, I think, from Dhyama, said he noticed when there might have been talk that Yogananda, or some seemingly negative talk that Yogananda disapproved of, and he would turn away, and his face would be that of iron resolve, and he would be so strong-willed to not allow any lack of God from impregnating his mind. And to your point, Mark, at the beginning, you shared a really lovely story about the Himalayas saying to Yogananda, you can't let, or I can't remember the exact word, correct me on this, Mark, but your mind must be filled with God at all times. Like that rang true to my mind. So no doubt, I feel that I could be wrong, that he experienced all the tribulations, the trials that we experience, but he had the iron resolve to overcome it. That's the way I see it. And he talked about Jesus and John the Baptist, and how John the Baptist might have then been Jesus's like spirit. Jesus might have been a disciple of John the Baptist in a previous life, and John said to Jesus, "Well, how can I baptize you? You know, you're Jesus. You know, you've excelled." And you know, Jesus went on with it regardless. And Yogananda, I think, refers to something similar where he talks about us. You know, we were his disciples, but you know, there's a relationship there where we can all help each other in the sense that, you know, we will all work through the same things, and no doubt to my mind, you know, Yogananda's experiencing all the trials and tribulations as a soul, just as Jesus, you know, on the cross, you know, God, why have you forsaken me? You know, had that moment of trial.
No, absolutely. I mean, there was, it just come to my mind, Brother Chidananda's closing talk, convocation this year about finding a spiritual compass. And there's that charming story about Guruji when he's taken on a roller coaster and he's only been in the States about a year, and his horror at having to go on this thing. And he just went into samadhi. I thought, okay, well, that's a good trick if you can do it.
But I think Yogananda's other trick is, look, if life gets too hard, just sleep. And I love that, because, you know, if you can't really overcome, if you're getting too bogged down, just take a nap, you know. And he talks about that, to kind of switch off, stop thinking too much, you know, reconnect with God in that way. So yeah, no samadhi, take a snooze.
Yeah, on a roller coaster.
Lovely. So that's I think that sums up the minute nicely, gents. Is there anything else that you would want to include? Priyank, is there anything you want to cover?
Just one thing. We talked a lot about willpower today. Just one quote that came to my mind that Guruji used to tell people. So he said, "The only difference between you and Yogananda is that I made the effort." And I thought that resonates well with some of our discussion today.
Yeah, that's a good one. We're going to have to make that a recurring theme, like a parting quotation as an affirmation. Yeah.
Yeah, nice idea.
Mike, anything from you?
Nothing to add to that, no.
Mic drop there from Priyank. Mark?
No. I mean, it's such a lovely arrangement. I think we could talk for months about it, but right now, no.
Oh yeah, come back on at any time.
Yes, thank you very much, Mark. It's been lovely.
Thank you, guys.
Lovely having you with us.
Really, it's lovely. It's been lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining, Mark.
Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.